Look, you don't need to be an expert to make pasta by hand. All you need is flour, eggs, and a slight addiction to carbs. Making pasta by hand is one of the most fun and most rewarding cooking experiences of all time, in my honest opinion. Plus, you probably already have the ingredients at home. Pasta to me is such a great symbol for what Italian food really is. All of the classic Italian recipes are so incredibly simple, yet all the flavors work so harmoniously and perfectly. And more importantly, it's about the freshness and the quality of the ingredients over the amount of ingredients. That's what I love about Italian food. Beauty and simplicity. Oh, and I almost forgot, in case you didn't already see with your eyes, I'm in a new kitchen. Welcome to my new humble abode. Let's make some pasta.
Now, first thing I'm gonna show you is what I like to call an all-purpose pasta dough. This pasta dough can be made into many shapes: ravioli, garganelli, fettuccine, you name it, and I'm gonna show you 4 different shapes with 4 different sauces. First things first is we're gonna make that all-purpose pasta dough. And that starts with 3 cups or 480 grams of 000 type flour. Now, if you can't find that, then you can totally use all-purpose flour if you prefer. I just prefer 00. Now, the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna dump that flour out onto a flat surface into sort of like a mound shape. Sprinkle on a half a teaspoon or 2 grams of fine sea salt. Using your hand shaped like a claw, make a well into that mound of flour, large enough to hold around 5 eggs. Then crack 5 large whole eggs into the well of that flour. Drizzle in a teaspoon or 5 grams of extra virgin olive oil. Using a fork, start gently whisking the eggs until they come together cohesively. Now, once the eggs have come together, you're gonna keep whisking, but as you're whisking, slowly flick in a little bit of the flour on the sides, being careful not to make a hole or a dent in the well, otherwise all your eggs will run out, so just be careful. And as you do that, you'll notice that it slowly becomes a paste, and then it starts to clump together, and then it starts to become a dough. And once it becomes a dough, then you're gonna start using your hands. So you can take the fork out and then start mixing it and sort of squeezing it together with your hands. Once it's completely sort of combined, then you're gonna begin kneading it. And you're gonna knead this dough anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes until it is beautifully silky smooth. Now, if for some reason your dough is a little too dry, you can add a tablespoon of water at a time until it comes together. Now look how silky smooth that dough is. Once your dough is nice and kneaded, you're gonna go ahead and wrap it in plastic wrap. Make sure that it's airtight. You do not want this to dry out, and let it sit out at room temperature for at least an hour or overnight in the fridge. And that's it. That is your all-purpose pasta dough. Now, the first shape that we're gonna make is going to be fettuccine, aka tagliatelle. It's really regional. I mean, there's not much of a difference. Some people say that one is thinner than the other, but it really just depends on the region that you get it from. To start this pasta, as with any pasta, you're gonna lightly dust your dough with flour and then divide it into 4 equal pieces. Then you're gonna roll that dough out until it's about 1/4 of an inch oval. Obviously, you're gonna need a pasta roller here. If you don't have one, then I'll put a link in the description if you wanna go get one. Now, pass it through your pasta roller on the widest setting, then fold it like a letter and pass it through the roller once more. Without folding it again, begin passing the dough, working down each thinness setting, one setting at a time, ideally no more than once per setting, until you reach the thinnest or second thinnest setting that you can on your pasta roller. Obviously dusting with flour as needed, so your dough doesn't stick, because that would really suck. Now, this part is much easier than it looks. Just handle the dough gently and let it drape over your hands rather than holding it with your fingertips. Now, this rolling technique is gonna apply to all of the following pasta shapes that I'm gonna show you. Now, to make the fettuccine slash tagliatelle, you're gonna cut that long sheet of dough into segments in the desired length of your noodle. That equated to 4 equally sized segments of dough sheets for me. Now, there's 2 ways to make the noodles for the fettuccine slash tagliatelle. You can either use a machine's attachment, but if you don't have the attachment for the machine, you can simply take a sheet and roll it up lengthwise until you sort of get a tube. Think of it as a savory pasta version of a fruit roll-up. Then using a sharp knife, sort of saw away to cut 1/2-inch segments of that tube. Those will be your individual noodles. Now, that's how you do it with a knife. Just make sure that you don't press the knife down, otherwise you're just gonna pinch the dough together. You want these to be noodles, so make sure that you're slicing it. If you need to saw at it, but saw it with gentle care. And boom, noodles without the tagliatelle attachment. Look at that. Once you unroll these noodles, make sure to toss them with a generous amount of flour to make sure that they don't stick together. Now, the attachment part is pretty straightforward. Just make sure that your pasta sheet is very generously dusted with flour, otherwise it will stick in the attachment. And just run it through the fettuccine attachment, and boom, you got fettuccine comes out the other end just like that. And as mentioned before, make sure to toss generously with flour. Now, to make the sauce for the tagliatelle slash fettuccine, we're gonna make a pork ragu. All you need to do is finely dice 1 stalk of celery, 2 carrots, and 1 medium-sized yellow onion. Then you're gonna take a 1.5 pound boneless pork shoulder and cut it into 1-inch chunks. Heat up a large, heavy-bottom pot over medium-high heat with 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Season your pork with salt and pepper and sear on both sides for 2 to 3 minutes on each side to get them nicely caramelized. And make sure to sear them in one even layer, no overcrowding the pan, otherwise you're just not gonna get that nice sear. Now, I say that when I ironically have this pan a little overcrowded, so try to do this in batches unlike I did. I was kind of in a rush. Once they're done, transfer all the meat into a medium-sized bowl. Now, there should be some remaining oil in the bottom. If you need to add a little more, you can. Turn the heat to medium heat and add all of your finely diced veg from earlier. Stir it and saute until all the vegetables begin to turn translucent. Then to that pan, you're gonna add 3 tablespoons or 55 grams of tomato paste. Give it a stir and saute until the tomato paste begins to caramelize a little bit. Deglaze with a half a cup or 120 milliliters of red wine. Bring it to a boil and let it boil for about 20 to 25 seconds. Then add 2 cups or 480 milliliters of chicken stock. Give it a quick stir, season it lightly with salt, bring it up to a boil, reduce to a simmer, and then add your meat back to the pan along with its juices, cover it with a tight-fitting lid, place it in the oven at 300 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour or until the meat is super tender, and that's it, that's the sauce. Next up is spaghetti. We'll be doing this with a carbonara sauce, so I'll show you the sauce towards the end of this video, but you're basically gonna do the exact same thing as the fettuccine. You're gonna roll it out into a thin sheet, cut it into segments of the desired noodle length, and this one, unfortunately, as far as I know, is best done through a spaghetti attachment. If you don't have one, you could do it with a knife, but I gave it a shot and it really looks way better with an attachment, so, you know, sorry. Now, pasta number 3 is Garganelli. Now, it sounds weird, but basically it's kind of like penne, but with ridges. Now, using the exact same sheeting technique as before, take one of your 4 segments of sheeted pasta dough and cut them into 2-inch by 2-inch squares. Now, using a gnocchi board or some sort of object with ridges, you're gonna place a square diagonally on the surface of that object, or in this case, a gnocchi board, and using a chopstick sort of as your forming shell, you're gonna roll that square of pasta dough around the entire chopstick, working from one point to the other point until it sticks on the other end. Make sure you're using enough pressure that it's actually sticking and giving the Garganelli its ridges. And you're gonna repeat that process with all your little squares of pasta dough. It seems like a lot, but you'll get a lot faster as you move along, and it'll go by pretty quickly. Now for the Garganelli pasta sauce. This one is much easier than the last one. So you're gonna start with 1 28-ounce can of peeled San Marzano tomatoes. Go ahead and put those through a mesh strainer and just let them drain for a little bit to get that excess juice out. We only want the whole tomatoes in there. Add those tomatoes to a food processor and puree until smooth. Saute 4 ounces of pancetta with 1 tablespoon of olive oil and just kind of saute that until the pancetta just begins to brown a little bit and has rendered the majority of its own fat. Once that's done, add 1 red onion that's been small diced to that pan and saute that until they begin to soften and turn translucent. Then add your pureed tomatoes, season with salt and pepper to taste, bring it up to a simmer and simmer it for about 8 to 10 minutes or until those flavors meld together. And that's it, that's your sauce for Garganelli, pancetta, red onion tomato sauce. Oh, and do make sure to stir it on occasion while that's simmering, otherwise it will burn on the bottom and you'll be very sad. Now on to our last pasta, which is tortellini. Same exact pasta sheet as before, but instead of dividing it into 4 segments, you're gonna leave it as one single sheet, and using a 2 3/4 inch biscuit cutter, you're going to cut little circles out of that pasta dough, just like if it was a cookie, basically. You can use cookie cutters, you can use a biscuit cutter, whatever you can find to make little circles. Now, once you have all of your said little circles, you're gonna take little pea-sized amounts. You don't wanna put too much, you don't wanna overstuff these tortellini. You may have to practice and get it right. But you're gonna take little pea, sort of like teaspoon-sized dollops of this ricotta mixture, which I'll put down below in the description. It's literally just like ricotta, parmesan, chopped parsley, mixed together in a bowl, so the ingredients for that will be in the description. Once you have that done, you're gonna gently pick up one of the circles of your dough with your filling in it, and you're gonna carefully fold it over, kind of like, basically like a taco, and pinch and crimp the edges shut with your fingers. Once you have your tortellini taco, you're gonna take the edges with the 2 points on them, bring them together, and then pinch those together. So you're basically folding the taco the other way in half again and pinching the 2 edges together. And then you have a tortellini. Just repeat that process with each of the individual circles, and then you've got tortellinis, dude. So the sauce for the tortellinis is the easiest of all 4 sauces. So you're gonna start with 1 packed cup of fresh basil leaves, a 1/4 cup of walnuts or pine nuts. I actually didn't have any pine nuts on hand, so, you know, walnuts were the choice. 2 cloves of fresh peeled garlic. Place that all in a food processor and blend until that begins to form a paste. Add a half cup of freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano. Blend once more to fully pastify. And then while blending, slowly stream in half a cup of extra virgin olive oil. Then season with salt to taste, and that's it. You've got your pesto ready to go. Now for the assembly of the pastas and sauces. So, for the fettuccine / tagliatelle, whichever you want to call it, whenever you make it, depending on how much you make, you're gonna want that sauce to be hot when you add the pasta to it, obviously. So I'm heating up a little bit of that pork ragu here for a single serving portion of pasta. I've got a pot of boiling water behind me, and you're basically just gonna want to boil these noodles from literally 30 seconds to 1 or 2 minutes. Fresh pasta cooks very, very quickly. Make sure that you're tasting it intermittently to decide how done you want it to be. So now that my ragu sauce is nice and hot, I'm gonna go ahead and add my tagliatelle, which has been cooked obviously, to the pot and toss it thoroughly to coat evenly with the sauce. Be sure to check the salt levels there and adjust seasoning if necessary, and just plate it up, dude. Serve that with some freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano and you're good to go. Now for the Garganelli, you're gonna heat up that red onion and pancetta tomato sauce and get that nice and hot. Put in your cooked pasta with a little bit of the pasta water, add a little knob of butter, and then just stir and toss to combine to get that butter to emulsify. Season it with salt to taste, and boom, Garganelli, red onion, and pancetta tomato sauce done. The tortellini are pretty straightforward. Literally just toss them with as much pesto or as little pesto as you want. Season it with salt to taste. That's it. Now, as for the spaghetti carbonara, I will have a link to my carbonara recipe, and you can literally just use this spaghetti in that recipe. To be honest, I just didn't want to explain it again. I'm just gonna be completely honest with you guys. I just did not want to explain it again. I got 1, 2, 3, 4 types of pasta. I'm sorry. And that is it, guys. Pasta, homemade, 4 kinds of sauces, 4 shapes of pasta. So if you enjoyed it or you learned something, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you next week. And I obviously forgot to record this portion.